Today or tonight, depending on where you live, the curtains have finally been unveiled on the RTX 4070 Super. This is NVIDIA's latest refresh on their 40 series cards, and it's going to be a big brother somewhat to the RTX 4070, coming in with a higher $50 price tag at now $599 versus the RTX 4070's $549. And in terms of the specs, you get roughly 20% more CUDA cores, and you also get a big 33% increase in the level 2 cache size, though the card still does carry the same 192-bit bus as well as the same 12GB of VRAM. And this is a really interesting thing with this card because depending on the game, you'll see in today's benchmarks, you'll get anywhere from minimal gains all the way up to over 20%, depending on the title and ultimately the resolution. We will start off with Robocop here, Rogue City, on high settings, and here's where at 1080p it does virtually the same as the 4070 and the RX 7800 XT, but then when we step it up to 1440p, it does start to pull quite sizably ahead of both these cards. And then moving on to the next title here, Alan Wake 2, here's where at 1080p the 4070 Super does manage to be the victor on the charts here, especially over the RX 7800 XT. But at 1440p, it does better than, scoring a little bit more of a lead as opposed to that of 1080p, and also scoring quite a sizable victory over the original 4070. Though if we move over to Returnal high settings, here's where at 1080p it does pretty well. It does score a sizable gap, but then moving on to 1440p, the gap widens even more between the 4070 and the 4070 Super. Going on to Starfield though, on low settings, here is where at 1080p, this is where the 4070 Super saw the biggest increase, actually at 1440p, in today's results, and at 1080p it does start to pull ahead of the RX 7800 XT, and this is an AMD sponsored title. And then at 1440p it does do even better. And checking back on the results, this is in this game over a 20% increase, so it must be more than just CUDA cores in this game. That level 2 cache must definitely be doing a lot of hard work in this title. And then moving on to Baldur's Gate 3, here's another example of where that level 2 cache does start to pull out some impressive results, I believe at the very least. Anyhow, after seeing these numbers, at 1080p it alleviates that terrible 0.1% low as well as 1440p, and it does score a massive victory over the original 4070 at both these resolutions. However, moving on to Apex Legends, we saw minimal gains at 1080p and at 1440p, and then moving over to Fortnite, it was somewhat of a similar story at both 1080p and 1440p. If we were to look at those last two titles, we can see that the more older the game, I guess the less you'll see in terms of raw performance gains with the 4070 Super versus the 4070. However, that is the raw gaming numbers with no DLSS, no fancy ray tracing on, and so if you're looking at those raw numbers, you'll see that any three of these cards, especially around the price point, is going to do a very good job for gaming. Now here is where we are going to start now taking a look at some other benchmarks, and we're going to start off with the power consumption. And here is where the 4070 Super does pull a little bit more power from the wall than the 4070, but it's still very well controlled, especially considering the performance gains you're getting here. And when testing out two different games for power consumption, in Fortnite we did see an increase here, but it's still very well controlled. And then also Returnal did see an increase in power consumption, but again, it was all in relation to more performance over the 4070. However, if you are into undervolting, here's where the 4070 will do quite well, where from past experience, I have learned via undervolting that I want to keep the 4000 series cards at around 1000 millivolt because I've actually sold a few PCs with RTX 40 series cards in them, and anything under that you can run into some instability sooner or later depending on the game. So 1000 millivolts is a blanket undervolt that I've found has no problems, at least ongoing. And here's where at these levels we did see a sizable boost in efficiency for the RTX 4070 Super. And it's also not just in the tune of lowering the power consumption, it's also in the tune of lowering the actual temperatures of the card. However, the fan speeds did remain the same at roughly 39%. And out of the box though, this card is very well controlled. The noise is great. The temperatures remain under 70 degrees. So it'll do a good job if you're looking for the Founders card, or I'm sure if you're looking for a custom aftermarket solution, it's going to be a very similar story, if not better. The final benchmarks we will pull up for you guys is the ray tracing benchmarks, where in Returnal, this is a game where the 4070 Super does do quite well, does start to pull ahead of the 4070. And of course, NVIDIA does have that ray tracing advantage over AMD's RX 7800 XT. However, moving on to the next benchmark, Alan Wake 2, with ray tracing turned on, really showed a huge difference between the NVIDIA and the AMD cards. And I'd say this is mainly due to the fact that on the high settings ray tracing preset, you do get path tracing included with the NVIDIA suite, and this just makes the ray tracing results stand out even more. However, you'll notice that I've also tried to turn on DLSS 3, and it works for the RTX 4070, but it doesn't currently work for the 4070 Super because I believe the beta driver just hasn't been optimized yet to allow frame generation to be turned on in Alan Wake 2, though I believe from the actual official driver, this should be fixed. Anyway, with all the benchmarks out of the way, it's time for the most juiciest part of the video. That is the analysis of the 4070 Super. What are my thoughts on this card, and who is this card ultimately going to be for? Well, I think we'll start off with the last question there. Who is this card going to be for? And it's for someone who, in my opinion, has the money and they want to splurge on a card that will play games well at 1440p, because at 1080p we saw a bit of a mixed bag there with the results, but overall at 1440p we did see quite a sizable boost over the 4070. Now, another big factor in this is the price. It's $50 US higher in the US, and so if you're in the USA, I would go for the 4070 Super over the 4070. But in Australia, I've looked around different prices all over the world, and in Australia, you can currently get the 4070 for under 900 Aussie dollars, and the MSRP of this card is going to come in at around 1119 Australian dollars, or so that's what I'm told. And so with over a $230 Aussie dollar gap in price, it would make more sense if you're in Australia to just go out and get a 4070. And then there's also the RX 7800 XT, which is under 800 Aussie dollars, and in America at the moment, that's around 500 US. So this is another factor. We've seen those power consumption results, and so if you're just doing raw rasterization, the raw gaming, no fancy extras, the 7800 XT is going to be a good option, especially coupled in with the fact that you live in an area where you don't pay much for power. But in Australia, we do pay quite a sizable amount for power per kilowatt hour, so in my opinion, it does make more sense in Australia to go with the NVIDIA options because they are more efficient. So with that said, I'm actually going to usher in two recommendations in today's video. The first being for raw gaming. That's no DLSS 3 frame gen, no ray tracing, and stuff like that. Just raw gaming, rasterization, and if that's you, I would just take a look at the area you're in, which of these three cards is the cheapest for you, coupled in with the fact to take a look at how much you're paying for power too. Over time, that will make a difference. And for me personally, that's what it's always about, getting the best deal for me, and I want you guys to always get the best deal for you. Take a look at the numbers as well. Take a look at the game you play. What games are you predominantly playing? You're playing newer titles? Are you playing at 1440p? You're probably going to actually get a lot out of the 4070 Super. But if you're playing, say, older competitive titles like Fortnite, Apex, then you're probably going to be wasting a bit of money going with the 4070 Super. Then we're going to get on to the second recommendation here, and that is if you want the fancy extras. If you want to turn on ray tracing, NVIDIA is a no-brainer here. They score massive leaps and bounds ahead of AMD currently for ray tracing performance. Then DLSS 3 frame gen is actually supported in a lot more titles currently than FSR 3 is. And so if you want to get extra out of your card and you want to turn all those fancy effects on, then the RTX 4070 Super at this price point is going to be the best buy. That of course is if you can just get it for 50 USD extra over the RTX 4070. So again, take a look at the country you live in, take a look at the prices, because the 4070 may just be a better deal than the 4070 Super like it is here in Australia. The final thing I want to talk about before I get on out of here, I've read forums about the comparisons of the 4070 versus 7800 XT. I've seen YouTube videos where people make it seem like it's almost a life or death decision that you're making if you get one over the other. And to be honest, the RTX 4070, the 7800 XT, and now the 4070 Super, they're all good cards. I can't fault any of these cards for being bad cards. Gaming on these cards, trying them out, and playing games, I'm really excited to play games on any three of these cards. So look at the MSRPs. If you can get a card for around that USD price point, that MSRP, then you're doing pretty well for a new card and you're going to be having a great gaming experience. So the 4070 Super, I can't knock it, but at the same time, I can't say it's the best card I've ever seen in terms of a new release either. Though that said, it is a solid release from NVIDIA, and this black aesthetic on the RTX 4070 Super does look really nice. It's actually one of my favorite Founders Edition cards that I've seen to date. And also on that note, it does carry the PCIe Gen 5 connector, though it does come with the adapter for the standard 8-pin PCIe connections. Anyhow guys, with all that aside, I hope you enjoyed today's review. If you did, be sure to hit that like button. Also let us know in the comments section below what you think of these 3 cards in the list today. Love reading your thoughts and opinions as always, and I'll catch you in another tech video very soon. Peace out for now. Bye.